Hello everyone, welcome to my nature diaries. Well, I found those beautiful little snowdrops and I decided back in the studio to just make a quick drawing and illustration of them, which I did, and I really like how this turned out in ink. And so I went ahead and transferred it over onto another piece of paper that I used a light box with, and then just cross-hatched it on the back so I could transfer it onto some other watercolor paper. And you can see the sketch close up, and then on the right I just did a regular watercolor, which I really like. I think it turned out nice, but I decided to do the one on the left. So I'm starting a brand new journal, and this was from a friend, and she actually wrote this quote in here, so I'm really excited to finish this watercolor journal from her. And you can see I just transferred the image over. I traced it and put it onto the sheet of watercolor paper. I thought this would be so pretty as the first page in my nature diary. So I went ahead and sketched it, traced it in, and then here's the colors that I used. The first one being bright phthalo green with some yellow cad, and then I mixed the same colors and then also added ultramarine with that, as well as some sap green. And then my last color, I just basically took a bunch of greens and made a muted gray for the shadows. So I think this is going to be really nice, and I like the idea of some bright spring colors and some darker colors, and it's just going to add some nice contrast to it all. The nice thing about making an illustration like this is it's almost like a coloring page that you made yourself, and so really it's just kind of relaxing to just color in the lines, and that's what I did, because I'm going to ink it in later, and the ink that I'm going to be using, I wasn't sure if it was 100% waterproof, at least right away, so I figured this would be the safe way to do it. But you could ink it in first if you decide to do that, and then color it in, because it was a little hard to see the lines sometimes, so I might be a little bit sloppier than what I normally would like to be, but I think it's going to turn out well. The nice thing about making your own illustration or drawing, when you find something while you're hiking or walking, is you can capture little details. Like on these snowdrop flowers, they have white petals, but there's this little stripe on, like you see I'm doing right now, and it reminds me of like an awning for a window, and I thought it was such a pretty little detail on these flowers, and it just makes you notice them because you are having to draw them, and then of course you're painting them, and it really makes you just take notice of what you are finding and discovering, and you can really enjoy it that way. And that's probably as much fun as when I first found them to begin with. So I'm really just kind of going in with some darker greens. I'm just mixing up the green colors to make it interesting, adding some of the brighter tones, because it is spring after all. And this isn't the best paper. It's a Strathmore watercolor book, but for watercolor, wash and ink, it's perfect. And this is just a great way to get started for me and to record, again, some things that I've found. And I'm excited with the illustration. I really like how it's turned out so far. So I'm just going back and adding those layers, and you could do this of course with colored pencils or anything else that you'd want to use. And then here I started tracing with that gray, and then I realized I'm going to be inking this, so I don't need to do that, so I just stopped, and now I'm just putting with that grayish color I made with some of the greens. I'm just putting in some shadows and just a few little details that I'm going to fully pull out with the ink in just a few minutes. So I'm just finishing up with more of these grays, greenish grays, and it's such a relaxing experience when you are just focusing on this flower up close, all the little details and the colors, and just trying to capture the feeling that you had when you first saw them. A new discovery for me as well in the studio is this dip pen and ink. I just love it. I just love the variation of width that you get with this pen, and I don't have to switch from one micron pen to another. So for what I'm doing here, it works out perfectly. And I can't even explain how relaxing it is to just draw with this pen, and just take your time, and you can push down to get, obviously those wider widths. I'm still learning, but I love the feel of this. I highly recommend it. I think part of having your own nature diary or nature journal is just the experience you have while you're actually creating, as you're actually recording. And that has to be a huge part of the whole idea for me. And that's why I wanted to create this channel, was just to tell a story as I'm learning it and discovering beautiful little creations around me. And I'm so excited to be able to share it with all of you as well. So I'm just hitting this flower with some different details and a few little strokes here and there, little hash marks. And I'm just kind of doing this intuitively, I guess, is the way I want to describe it. So I don't really have a big plan, but I'm enjoying it. And then, of course, in real speed, you can see that it takes a little bit with these pens, but they really do hold quite a bit of ink, especially for a smaller illustration. So again, I really recommend them if you are looking for something to enhance your writing, journaling, art experience in general. This little illustration reminds me of something you might find in a children's book or Beatrix Potter. I don't know, something like that. Very dreamy and nostalgic. I just really love it. And I'm excited to do more techniques with wash and ink. And if you would like to see more of this and watch what I discover along my way, please hit subscribe as soon as you're done watching this video. I didn't want these little snowdrops to be just floating on the page, so I started to add in some washes with those greens that I used. And of course, I started out really watery at first, adding some layers, and then just kept adding some different greens and just kind of experimenting. I just love this part. It feels like you're exploring, discovering, even with watercolor. It's such a contemplative experience, and I really enjoyed just adding and letting it dry and then adding a few more layers. But I do think it helped, again, ground the whole little composition. I decided to add some lines and guidelines because I'm going to actually use my dip pen to write in the journal, and I normally don't. I've never used it before, actually. I think this is the first time, and so I wanted to make sure I had some guidelines, and you can erase those later if you want. But for now, I'm just kind of measuring off the space in between and just giving this a try. I'm not going to write a whole bunch in this first one. Again, this is an experiment, so here we go. My first time with a dip fountain pen, and I really have to say I enjoyed the experience. And remember, experience is a big part of journaling of any kind, and it should be the same in a nature journal. It doesn't have to be science. It can be just like the little discoveries that you find, like I did on a walk when there was nothing blooming that day, and I found these beautiful little flowers. So that's important, to make sure you record those moments in time, not only just for you, but for other people as well. And again, don't forget to write what you found and the time and the date that you found it, or at least the year. That really helps you to go back and remember all those experiences. I decided to make sure I wanted to include some information about the snowdrops, so I did look up some facts about them and made sure I recorded them as well. And I'd really like to plant them in my garden. So let me know, do you have them in your garden? Have you seen them before? They're really uncommon around here where I live. I live in Northeast Ohio, and I just don't see them very often. So I'd love to be able to buy some of the bulbs and plant them. And even though it's not a wildflower, why not add something beautiful to your garden if you can? Well, I'm finishing up by adding a title to this little story. I feel like every entry is going to be a little story for me. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember please to like, subscribe, and to comment. I'd love to hear from you and have you follow along as I discover these little beauties in nature. And please remember to explore, discover on your own, because you have a story to tell. And until we meet again next time, have a wonderful day. Bye.